everybody, welcome back to the channel. Happy hump day. Today's story is Puss in Boots, an Aspel fairy tale. A young man is devastated when his father dies, leaving him with nothing but his pet cat. But that's until it starts talking. There was once a poor man who left nothing more to his 3 sons than his 58-inch plasma TV, his sofa and his cat Puss. The 2 oldest brothers, having the first pick of the goods, settled down on the sofa to watch TV. But the youngest was deeply distressed at having so pitiful a share. "My brothers," he complained, "can sit here all day enjoying their goods, but what the hell am I supposed to do with this stupid cat? I haven't even got a bit of string for it to chase. I might as well take it down to the vivisection centre and see if I can get 10 groats for it." Puss, who heard all this, said to him, "Do not worry yourself thus, my good master. Just get me a pair of boots and a bag, and I'll set off into the world and make your fortune." "A talking cat," said the young man. "To think I almost sold you to a lab. I could charge people 10 groats a time to see this." "Just get me the boots," said the cat. "I want the ones like Jay-Z wears, and no snide ones from the market." When Puss had his boots, he tied them up fashionably with the tongues hanging out, and he went to the woods where there was a great rabbit warren. He filled his bag with grass, waited until an eager young rabbit jumped into it, and immediately drew the bag shut. Proud of his catch, Puss went straight to the king's palace and asked to speak with his majesty. He was shown upstairs into the king's apartment, and making a low bow, said, "I have brought you, your majesty, a rabbit, which my noble lord the Marquis of Slough has commanded me to present to you." "Tell thy master," said the king, "that I thank him for his kind gift." "I will, majesty," said Puss, and he went from the king's apartment out onto the staircase, whereupon he jumped off the last step and landed on his face. Puss began to howl in a fearsome manner, which brought the king running from his chambers. "Sir Cat," said the king with great concern, "what ill has befallen you?" "Ah!" howled Puss. "That staircase is crooked. It's badly maintained and slippery. I want compensation. Ah!" "Compensation?" said the king. "My back's buggered for sure," cried Puss. "How am I going to catch mice now? I'm claiming 1,000 groats for loss of earnings and 500 for emotional distress. That, or we can settle." The king's Lord Chamberlain, who had been drawn to the commotion, advised the king to settle for 100 groats. Puss left the castle purring at his success and delivered the money to his master. The next day Puss went back to the woods and caught 2 rabbits in his bag. Once again he quickly pulled the bag shut and went to the king's palace, where he found that the staircase was closed for repair work. He used another staircase and entered the king's apartment, where he made a low bow and presented the rabbits to the king. "I have brought you, majesty," said Puss, 2 rabbits, which my noble lord the Marquis of Slough has commanded me to present to your majesty from him." "Tell thy master," said the king, who eyed Puss warily, "that I thank him, and that he gives me a great deal of pleasure. Please watch your step on the way out." "I will, sir," said Puss, making another low bow. On his way out he spied a cup of tea on a table and dived into it, knocking the tea onto his head. "Ah!" Puss screamed. "It burns! It burns!" "Sir Cat," cried the king, "are you injured?" "I'm scarred for life," wailed Puss. "I have terrible burns underneath my sodden fur, and the pain and suffering I'm going through is incomparable. Compensate me at once. Ah!" "But that tea was cold," exclaimed the king. "Cats are much more sensitive to heat," cried Puss. "You should be aware of that. Now I'm claiming for discrimination as well. 200 groats. Ah!" "There's no need for it to go to court," said the worried king. "Look, here's 200 groats, cash." Puss went from the castle with his earnings and presented them to his master, who was greatly pleased and went at once to the pub. The next day Puss heard that the king was to take a drive through the park with his daughter, who was the most beautiful princess in the world. "Follow me and hide in the trees in the park," he said to his master, "and your fortune is made. You need do nothing but what I tell you, and don't say a word. Just leave it all to me." The young man did what Puss advised him to without knowing why. When the king passed by, Puss ran up to the royal BMW and threw himself straight under the front wheel. "Ah!" screamed Puss, and the king's car screeched to a halt. The king's beautiful daughter saw Puss lying miserably under the BMW, and she began to cry, for she had a sweet and good-hearted nature. "Compensation!" Puss cried pitifully. "Oh, compensate me!" "I've had about enough of you," said the king. "Where is my master, the Marquis of Slough?" cried Puss. "He is the most feared accident and personal injury lawyer in the land. Master! Master!" The young man came running through the trees, and he found himself greatly confused at what he saw before him. "He came out of nowhere," cried the king. "I didn't see him. You can't sue me for that, can you, good sir?" The young man remembered that he was to say nothing, and kept quiet. "How about I settle for 300 groats?" said the king. Confused as he was, the young man knew his instructions, and remained silent. "Fine, 500, said the king, "on condition that this all goes away now, and we don't have to claim off my insurance. It'll send my premium through the bloody roof." "500 will do, Majesty," cried Puss from underneath the BMW. "500 groats, and a lift home for us both, for I fear I will never walk again." "Very well," said the king, and helped the young man and his cat into the car. The king's daughter took a secret inclination to the young man who had bargained her father out of such a sum, and when he cast 2 or 3 slightly lustful glances at her, she fell in love with him to distraction, and began scratching his initials into the car window. Puss, quite overjoyed to see his plan beginning to succeed, slipped quietly out of the car at some traffic lights and ran on ahead. He ran through the town and out into the countryside, until he came to a stately mansion, the master of which was a terrible ogre. This was, in fact, the richest ogre ever known, for all of the land that Puss had passed through on the way to the mansion belonged to him. Puss knew of the ogre and his magic powers, and asked to speak with him to pay his respects. The ogre received him civilly and invited him to sit down. "I overheard some men in the pub," said the cunning Puss, "although I don't believe a word of it, who said you have the power to take on the shape of any creature or object, from the mightiest lion to the smallest pebble. I must admit that I think these stories to be a crock of dung, especially the pebble bit." "Really?" growled the ogre, and even as he spoke he changed himself into a tiny pebble. "Who left that lying there?" Puss cried, and he jumped on to it. The pebble slid out from underneath him, and Puss fell down hard on his back. "Ah!" Puss groaned. "What's the matter?" said the ogre, changing back into his own form. "Compensation!" wailed Puss. "Compensation!" "Shut up!" said the ogre. "Ogres don't pay compensation. That would be absurd." "Look out of the window and down the road," cried Puss. "Here comes my lawyer in that BMW, and he has the king with him, for they are great mates. I'd get yourself down to the cash point now if I were you. I'll settle for 100 groats if you pay cash." As the ogre wandered away to find a cash point, Puss ran out into the road, and when the king's car paused at a crossing, he slipped back into the car unnoticed by the distracted princess and the irate king. "Your Majesty must come into the sweet part of my Lord Marquis of Slough for a nice cup of tea," he piped up. "My Lord Marquis," said the king, clearly impressed, "does this desirable residence truly belong to you? You must surely be the finest accident and personal injury lawyer in the land. Look at the size of that satellite dish. I bet you can pick up porn from Antarctica in that thing. I've a very good mind to offer you my daughter's hand in marriage, so impressed am I." The party went up the path to the front door, which the ogre in his haste had left open. "My plan is almost complete, master," whispered Puss triumphantly. Just at that moment, however, from behind him came a tumbling noise, followed by a loud crack, and they turned to see the king lying on the ground with blood dripping from his mouth. "Ah!" screamed the king. "I've fallen on these flagstones, which were slippery." "Do not worry, Majesty," said Puss. "I will go and find you a plaster." "Plaster!" cried the king. "My teeth are surely broken. I will have compensation for this. I'm going to sue you bloody blind. That, or I'll settle, but only for 800 groats. "Damn!" said Puss to his master. "We'd better hand the money over." "I've only got 790 groats," said the young man. "I spent 10 in the pub." "Then off to the dungeons with you," cried the king. "Wait, Majesty," begged the young man. "I'll get your extra 10 groats. I think the vivisection centre's still open. Where's the cat gone?" But Puss was nowhere to be found, and was not seen again until he resurfaced in an identity theft case involving Dick Whittington's cat several years later. The end. Don't forget to like and subscribe and press the wee bell notification. And a huge big thank you to all my subscribers, patrons and members. See you next week. Bye bye.